You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly.
Good afternoon. I now call to order the meeting of the directors of the New York Convention Center Development Corporation for Wednesday, March 15th, 2023. I'd like to note for the record that this meeting is being webcast. The directors have received the relevant written materials in advance of today's meeting and are free to ask any questions at any time. We welcome public comment on today's agenda items. I will note for the record that the public was given the opportunity to comment on the agenda items by submitting their written comments by 5:30 p.m. yesterday, and no comments were received. I will also note that we do not have any members of the public attending today's meeting. Before we begin the substantive portion of the meeting, I would like to ask the directors whether anyone has any potential conflict of interest with respect to any of the items on today's agenda. If so, I would ask you to please make an appropriate disclosure on the record at this time. We will then be sure that you may recuse yourselves from any discussion or vote with regard to such item or items. Hearing no conflicts, For the foregoing having been noted for the record, I will now ask Robin Stout, President of the corporation, to start things off with the President's report. I will note for the record that this item is being presented for your information only, and no vote will be required. Robin?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm happy that Deb put this at the beginning of the agenda, so I can do one last President's report before I get ousted by the action later in the meeting. But the directors will recall that the last time we met in September, the directors authorized a final settlement with the expansions development team, a joint venture of Lindley's and Turner. I'm happy to report that the authorized settlement was concluded. All Lindley's Turner claims have been settled and waivers have been executed. The project was completed on time for the resumption of Javits post-pandemic events, and the settlement was within the project budget as we discussed back in September. All in all, a very good result, and I want to thank the directors for being an important part of that. And of course, if you haven't been to the new facility yet, I strongly encourage you to go. It's truly magnificent. Nonetheless, there are a handful of items left to be done. Lindley's Turner is remediating a small number of warranty claims and an even smaller number of construction deficiencies, but none of those impact either safety or operations. CCDC has all of the requisite operating permits, as you know, but we are working with DASNY and with the FDNY to secure final or permanent certificates of occupancy. And as you will hear in the action item, the last action item concerning the Real Estate Council, CCD at some point anticipates disposing of Site K and the former truck marshaling yards, our excess properties for development, but at present there is no timetable for that. And lastly, I just want to say how much I enjoyed working on the project. I became the president in April of 2017, so almost 6 years ago now. And I really appreciate working with this board. This whole team has been very supportive, often opinionated, which I actually appreciate, but it couldn't have been done without you, and I appreciate all those efforts. And so with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Robin. Deb, for the record, I'd like to speak on behalf of the board and thank Robin for his service. The project was done magnificently, more or less on budget, more or less on time. And considering the scope of what you had to accomplish and considering where you came from, you were not a real estate developer by trade. I think that we should know for the record our hearty congratulations and thank you to Robin.
Thank you.
Okay, continuing the agenda, Robin will now request authorization for the corporation to adopt its fiscal year 2023-2024 operating and capital budgets. Robin?
These will look largely familiar to the directors as we were discussing both the ESD, the parent, and each of its subsidiaries, including CCDC, are obligated by law to adopt a fiscal year budget. The fiscal year will begin on April 1st, 2023. And we have adopted these budgets for the past 5 or 6 years, and surely with Sarah St. Amand and Barbara Lampin before me. At this point, the budgets are relatively minimal. As you will see from the attachment to this first item, the operating budget is a little bit less than last year. That is because Stacy Tran, who's assisted me for many years as an executive assistant, is actually going to be with the real estate department now as opposed to Javits. But so those costs are reduced from the prior year. And then if you turn to the capital budget, obviously having finished construction, the $1.325 billion expansion project, there's very little left to do. You will see one of the two of the larger categories down at the bottom of that proposed capital budget, the construction costs and the other miscellaneous costs. Those really are not expansion costs. Those would be potential. Most of those would be potential capital improvement items still to be worked out with CCOC as need be. Of course, OC will, even though there was a brand new renovation in 2015 and then the brand new expansion in 2022, there will always be capital needs for such a massive facility as the Javits Convention Center. And so we've tried to set aside a small amount of money to continue to make sure that it remains a first-class facility. So with that, I'd be happy to answer questions, but otherwise I'd ask the board to adopt both the operating and the capital budgets.
We have a motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Robin, please continue to present the appointment of officers item for our consideration.
Yes, I think the last time the directors undertook an authorization of officers when I was appointed in April of 2017. Since then, we've had some turnover with the ESD ex officio members, but you see on the first page of the materials the list of current office holders. The primary reason for looking at the list of officers, again, is, of course, my resignation and retirement. We are recommending that Rebecca Pellegrini be appointed as president of the subsidiary. Also, just for continuity purposes and to make sure we have a signatory, we're recommending that Arden Sokolow, who may put her head in at some point, who's the new head of the ESD real estate department, be appointed as a vice president, but that otherwise all of the existing officers would remain the same. And I only have one thing to say about Rebecca at the moment, and she can then speak for herself. But the first thing is that, as Henry alluded to, this board has been very kind to me to put up with me as the lawyer for the past 4 or 5 years. But Rebecca's background is in finance, and I believe she will be a very worthy successor because a lot of the final details with Javits will involve the end of the money. And so Rebecca's very strong in that field. And the second and last thing I would say is that I hired Rebecca for ESD, as she reminded me, 17 years ago. So, of course, I think very highly of Rebecca. I did then and I do now.
Tremendous foresight. way ahead of your time.
So, Rebecca, anything you would like to say?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that kind introduction. And as Robin mentioned, I joined the Moynihan team 17 years ago. I'm currently serving as the executive director and VP of real estate asset management for ESD as well. It's always been MSDC is always a small department. It gave me the opportunity to wear a lot of hats and learn many facets about the project, not just financial, but that was my primary, I served in that primary capacity. I'm very familiar with the challenges of large scale construction and coordinating myriad stakeholders. And it's been an incredible experience. So I hope to, if given the opportunity, bring those experiences to Javits. And it's very nice to meet all of you, of course. And if you have any questions.
Well, we welcome you and congratulations or condolences, as the case may be. One or the other. So I think if there are no questions for either Robin or Rebecca, we need a motion. Is that correct?
Yes, please.
Motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You can leave.
Rebecca told me I cannot leave.
So you're technically retired at this minute?
No, I'm technically not the president of the corporation at this
Oh,
moment.
you're not retired?
Oh, thank you.
In a couple of weeks.
So your last item, Mr. Stout, is to present today's final item, an authorization to amend a legal services contract with the law firm Venable LLC.
Yes, Madam President, Madam President and I discussed this, so she's allowing me to move forward with this last item. Just recall a couple of things. One is that for these many years, we've had a construction council, which has had a lot to do, and we've had a real estate council, which has had relatively little to do. The construction council is Venable. It actually was Schiff Hardin, and that team, the construction team went from Schiff Hardin to Venable, so it is now Venable, and they've been fantastic. They've been great all the way from the beginning of organizing the construction documents through to final completion and settlement. But the real estate council, as I say, had very little to do. It was originally Sherman and Sterling, which the board authorized almost a decade ago. Then it became, and that team moved to DLA Piper. But at the moment, that team at DLA Piper would not like to continue the representation. So we need new real estate counsel. So we went out, we CCDC staff in connection with the ESD legal department, we went out into the marketplace. We solicited 3 firms from the pre-qualified list, which these directors have adopted last year. We got responses from 2 of the firms, and after reviewing the responses and reflecting on the assignment, we think Venable should be recommended to the board as the successor real estate counsel. So we think that for a number of reasons. One, obviously Venable is a terrific firm, but we also think that actually having the construction counsel, which will be winding down, the same as our real estate counsel, will actually be synergistic, to use a word, to avoid overlapping assignments and inconsistent advice, et cetera, et cetera. The Venable real estate team also does other work for ESD, including on large-scale projects and dispositions of large pieces of property. So they know the ropes. We are recommending successor real estate counsel for retention, Venable. And if you have any questions, please let me know.
What's the dollar value of this? Or is there an estimate?
Actually, the dollar value of this is going to be, well, the short answer is actually 0, because we're going to transfer, there is an existing balance under the DLA Piper contract of about $740,000. So that balance is simply going to be transferred to Venable. So the Venable contract, the scope, as set forth in the materials, the scope will be extended to include real estate. The dollars from the DLA Piper will be moved over, and the term will be extended for an extra year, understanding that maybe the dispositions will happen at some point. So there's actually 0 budget hit as a result of this.
Why did DLA Piper decline to represent us?
Well, I think that, first of all, as I say, they were retained a decade ago, but have really relatively little to do. So I think that they were, perhaps discouraged that there wasn't more work. And I also think, just frankly, that the promise to abide by ESD rates is an issue with some firms. Yeah. So those would be the 2 reasons.
So if you ask a question, the answer isn't money, ask the question again. Got it. All right.
Something
Sorry.
like that.
All right. Any other questions or comments? If not, we'll entertain a motion for approval.
It's a good firm. I'm happy to move it.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. I don't believe there's anything else on the agenda.
Not for me.
So goodbye and thank you to Robert. Welcome to
Thank you. Thank you.
There being no further business, I would please entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks again, everybody.
Thank you.
Really,
Yes,
really
thank you.
appreciate it. Really appreciate all the help.
That's the best one.